Terror of Mechagodzilla. We are officially at the end of the Showa Godzilla cycle. And thank God, because talk about a series of just ups and downs in terms of quality. But let's close things out in the Showa era. Terror of Mechagodzilla saw the return to the director's chair of Ishiro Honda. Jun Fukuda was offered to return to direct this one, but he officially tapped out of the Godzilla franchise, saying that he had finally had enough, and Honda was brought back in. This would also serve as the last Godzilla movie for quite some time, not just in Japan, but anywhere for almost a decade. More on that, though, in just a minute. Godzilla is back, with his head screwed back on, and is back to fight Godzilla. However, there's also another monster in town looking to fight, named Titanosaurus. In my research, I found out that there was actually supposed to be more monsters than this. And I'm not just talking about like Mothra or Ghidorah. I'm talking about like monsters for Godzilla and Mechagodzilla to fight. To make a long story short, the Titanosaurus would have been three monsters combined into one. They would have been called Titans separately, but then would form up to form Titanosaurus. Kind of like Voltron. But due to budgetary reasons and due to the fact that it would have been really underexplained as to why they have the ability to do this power, it was ultimately scrapped. And Titanosaurus basically looks like a seahorse if he took whatever Scott Steiner took in the late 90s.
He's fat!
Titanosaurus is controlled of sorts by a mad scientist in very much a 2000 or 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea kind of motive, where he lives at the bottom of the sea and wants to destroy everything. Also, in a bit of an interesting twist, the mad scientist has a daughter who just so happens to be a cyborg. I'm not going to lie, I kind of wanted to see where they went with this. It's kind of half-baked, but I would have liked to have seen where they would have gone with something like that. Really, Terror of Mechagodzilla does not feel like the end of the Showa era of Godzilla. I'll explain why it was the end, but it really feels like they were trying with this one. They were trying to do different things. They were trying to introduce new concepts, but unfortunately, due to one, budgetary reasons, and two, financial reasons in terms of box office receipts, these concepts were never followed up on. So they're forever confined to the basket of what if. And I don't know if it's just because Mechagodzilla is just badass, but the fight at the end between Godzilla, Mechagodzilla 2, and Titanosaurus was just fantastic. In my research, I found that because of budgetary reasons, the battle was relatively tame. I didn't think it was tame. I thought it was pretty cool. But come to find out, the battle was actually supposed to be even bigger, destroying all of Tokyo. Yeah, but unfortunately, we'll probably never see anything like that. Or at least in the Showa era, anyway. Godzilla just pretty much like barely survives Mechagodzilla. He doesn't destroy Mechagodzilla like, say, Baragon or Ibera or any of these lower tier kaiju. No, 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 no. Mechagodzilla hands Godzilla his lunch, and Godzilla basically has to fight his way out every single time. Mechagodzilla is by far and away the best villain in these Godzilla movies, like by a lot. There's a scene in the final battle where Mechagodzilla has Godzilla on the ropes, and Godzilla's bleeding in this, and he bleeds in Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. I forgot to bring that up in the last review, but he's bleeding in this, and then the two just end up like meeting and just straight up punching each other. It's like that one fight in I believe it was Pride, where it's Yoshihiro Takayama and Don Fry, and they're just going like this, just punching each other. It was pretty much like that, and it's epic. There was a legit holy shit moment for me when Godzilla rips off Mechagodzilla's head again. I was like, if these people wanted to build Mechagodzilla again, you would think that they would do something about the whole like twisting the head off thing. And as I was thinking that, come to find out, Mechagodzilla 2 has a second head that has a beam that just pretty much knocks Godzilla back into the dirt. I was just like, they learned! But ultimately, Godzilla wins at the end because water is wet and fire is still hot. But the final scene of the movie sees Godzilla return to the sea quietly. And it was rather symbolic in that regard because, like I said, this was the last of the Showa era Godzilla movies. This movie actually underperformed at the box office, only getting about 980,000 box office receipts, which was the first time that any of these Godzilla movies had gotten that low of a number. And so Toho was like, yeah, I think we need to go back to the drawing board on this one. And it wasn't just a Godzilla thing, it was just a monster movie thing. The bubble had definitively burst. In monsters that I'm not even going to cover on this road, you got War of the Gargantuous, you got Gamera, you got Barugon, who have all their own lores and universes. And people were just kind of similar to what we're going through with the MCU right now. They're like, that's cool and all, but I need to know, like, I need something else now. And so Toho basically retired Godzilla for almost a decade, and he wouldn't return until 1984. But more on that next week. In closing of the Showa era, this movie had some high highs and some very low lows. I wouldn't say that there are any movies that in this era that I hate per se. I think there are ones that I'm like, okay, yeah, clearly they're a product of their time. I respect like all of the inner workings of the making of these movies wholeheartedly. There are some parts of it that haven't aged the best, but when these movies go epic, they really go epic. As for Terror of Mechagodzilla, I'm going to give it a great rating. There is a lot that I wanted to see more explored, but for obvious reasons they couldn't do. But when the movie's on, it's really on. Mechagodzilla just added something else that these movies desperately needed. But starting off next week on the channel, we will be diving into a little bit more King Kong on this series, talking about, first up, the King Kong from 1976, directed by John Gillerman, with Epictastic Joshua making his channel debut. And we will explore the first Godzilla movie of the Heisei era, The Return of Godzilla.